Weed of the Week is just an annual weed, so you wouldn't think it's that tough to control, but in many cases, it is. Our Weed of the Week is shattercane.
There's a farm operation that I know pretty well, not our operation, but another one that we work with, that actually planted shattercane as a cover crop and fought it for the next 20 years as a weed problem in their field. So that's why when you talk about cover crops, they're always concerned about, okay, how do you kill that cover crop if it happens to go to seed and you're gonna have to fight it now for years. So with shattercane, the biggest problem that we have about it is that it looks a lot like corn and it's tough to control in a corn crop. So if you've got corn in the rotation, you've got to be really diligent to make sure you stop shattercane from becoming a problem.
All right, in terms of control, I would look at in corn using one of the Group 15s, Harness, Surpass, Outlook Dual. That's not going to be perfect though. What you're going to have to follow with is one of the post-emerge grass killers. Now, we used to use Accent and Beacon years ago. The problem with some of the shattercane is it's ALS resistant. So if your ALS products don't work, then you'd want to look at Roundup or Liberty if you have those tolerant crops.
Well, in soybeans, it's kind of the same story. Roundup and Liberty are good options. And again, the ALS products like Pursuit and Raptor that we used to use post-emerge, they may or may not be very effective. However, you could use some of the grass control products like Clethodim, for example, will be pretty effective if you go to the higher rates. But always start with that pre of either Sonalan or Treflan. You've got to incorporate those, but they're pretty darn effective on shattercane.
Yeah, don't forget about Prowl. Prowl is the no-till product, so any of those yellows are pretty good. Turning to wheat, if it's non-ALS resistant shattercane, then start with Prepare. Otherwise, post-emerge, we're looking at the ACCase family. That's the only other family we've got other than ALS. ALS, you'd be talking Everest, and ACCase, probably looking at Axial.
As Brian was talking about earlier, this weed resistance issue to certain families of herbicides is a big deal. Now, yes, we've got a lot of Roundup and Liberty tolerant crops now we can choose from. But when you think about it, if we can't use that ALS family, it does take quite a few options off the table, especially if you're a small grains grower. And we talked about, well, wow, look at all the ALS products that we'd like to use. We only have 2 families we're using for grass control there. So we've got to be really conscious of this in our crop rotation. Here again, you could also use some alternative methods of weed control besides herbicides and look at what you're doing with a cover crop. If you get a cover crop established and you can get that so the shattercane never sees the light of day, well, you can hold down shattercane just like you can a lot of other resistant weeds that are out there that we're facing. So that's something you can work on with your agronomist as to which cover crops could be planted to hit the timing of that shattercane emergence just right so it's shaded out and doesn't have a chance to compete. Our Weed of the Week again is shattercane. It used to be a much bigger problem when all our crops were conventional. Now that we've got some Roundup Ready crops and Liberty Link crops, we've got a couple of nice options to keep shattercane under control. It's all time for this week's Weed, but Iron Talk is coming up next.